Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this exciting panel discussion on the Indian startup ecosystem brought to you by ELIGENT TV. It's 12 p.m. here in London, and we are thrilled to have you all join us for what promises to be an insightful conversation. Today, we are diving into the critical topics that are shaping the future of tech entrepreneurship in India. In the first part of our discussion, we will explore the opportunities for tech entrepreneurs, looking at the innovative landscape, the emerging technologies, and the key opportunities that lie ahead. Our second panel will focus on the future of Indian startup ecosystem, where we'll analyze the evolving trends and challenges that will shape the next wave of growth in the sector. We are honored to be joined by our official partners for this event, Indian Tech Society and Indian Tech Advocates. Now, I would like to invite Ani to join our conversation and start our topic about overview of Indian startup ecosystem. Ani, good afternoon. If you can join us and introduce yourself.
Hey, fantastic. Good afternoon, Slava. My name is Ani Kaprekar. I'm Mumbai-born, Manchester-based tech influencer. I'm co-founder of Tech India Advocates, which is collaborating with this fantastic initiative. Tech India Advocates is a not-for-profit that champions New India tech into the Western world. Personally, I'm also involved into tech and creative world. I sit on the boards of some creative organizations. So I'm at the intersection of tech, creativity, and startup and entrepreneurship. Slava, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ani, for your introduction. And I would like to start with the first question. We talk about the overview of Indian startup ecosystem. So how has Indian startup ecosystem evolved over the last decades, and what are the key factors driving its growth?
Since you say last decade, let me start with about 2014. So, see, India has gone from a safe job mindset to bold bets mindset. If you are a college dropout today, you are celebrated. Back in my days, 30 years back when I did that, I was an outcast. So there's a big mindset shift that has happened in India. Back in 2014, there were, I think, around 30,000 registered startups. And by 2024, that's close to 160,000. So there's a big boom that's happening in the startup ecosystem in the world, in India, to make it the third startup ecosystem in the world. That's most important. Now, what are some of the factors that are contributing to it, you ask me? I think the foundational has to be the stable democracy. You always need a foundation of stable government, stable democracy for any new thing to thrive. So that's been the foundational layer. India also is now currently reaping the harvest of demographic dividends. So India is the youngest major economy with median age just about 28. So it's a young and energetic population. It is digitally native and they're creating a lot of energy. There's one key event that I'll draw your attention which contributed to a startup boom. Actually, two events. In 2016, India did something called as demonetization. I'm going to keep the politics out of it, but that pushed an entire nation for digital interactions. Just around the same time in 2016, Reliance Jio launched cheap data in India. So India has the cheapest data compared to the world. So going from $3 per GB to less than 10 pence per GB. What that did was that pulled 700 million consumers onto digital interactions, got into mobile connected. That also immediately fuels more innovation, more digital demand, more digital services. This followed with UPI and building up of digital public infrastructure. Then, of course, all the government tailwinds of Startup India scheme, Atal Innovation, Invest India. So India tried to doing business with India very easy. Followed by investment boom. So since 2014, Indian startups have raised about close to $150 billion investment, despite the pandemic, despite the overall what's known as investment winter currently going on. Last factor I will highlight is India has now created in the startup world new heroes for people to follow because it's a generational change. There was a time in India when cricket stars and film stars, they were the heroes. But now, startup founders, and not just male founders, female founders also are the new heroes. So, around 2011, India had just one unicorn. Now, India is home to close to 110 unicorns or more. And many of these unicorns are led by phenomenal women leaders. So, that has completely glamorized getting into the startup ecosystem. So Indian startup revolution, I say, is no longer a boom. It's a sustained movement. It's high energy and it's built on scale and ambition.
Thank you so much for such a great overview of Indian startup ecosystem. Why do you think that India is the great destination for global startups and scale-ups? Do you have any particular insight on that?
So you ask me, why is India essential for global startups?
Yes.
I can give you 1.4 billion reasons. I mean, that's just the scale of India. So if you're not thinking about India currently, then you're already behind. See, India is now the ultimate consumer market. It is not just the fastest growing economy, it is a very digital savvy society. So if you're not launching your product, if you're not scaling or reaching India, you're going to be far left behind. India also has three biggest advantage as it offers this growing economy: democracy, diversity, and demography. India is stable as a democracy, so it's great for business to grow. It is diverse, which means across India, needs are different, and you can have more innovation that's fueled by this diversity. And I already spoke about the demography. The nation is young, not just in its own formation of 75 years, but the population. More than 65% of Indian population is in the 30 to 40 age group. So it is very digital savvy, digital native. India is also world's talent factory. So if you're looking for talent, India produces close to 5 million STEM graduates every year, let alone 1 million engineering graduates. So you're never short of talent. And also the cost effective scaling. So India offers a great advantage over, let's say, something like Silicon Valley, which is sort of, the breeding ground for innovation. India offers the scaling advantage. So if you are a global startup that's looking to go in India and not yet done, I would say your time is now.
Very interesting, and definitely, it's a great place, as you mentioned, for global startups and scale-ups to consider. Do you have any specification of sectors with the Indian startup space present the most promising opportunities for global tech entrepreneurs?
There are many I could speak of, but let me sort of first give a sage advice, if I may, to anyone looking to get into India. See, if you are an entrepreneur trying to get into India, my recommendation is do not just follow trends, follow the problem. Because if you follow the problem, you create great opportunity for innovation, you create opportunity for scaling, which you can then take globally. And that's been the story of success in India. Now, which are some of the sectors that are emerging? There are other panelists who will, of course, talk about it. To start with, fintech is always popular, but in fintech, I would say the digital payments part is done. India has solved that problem with UPI, Aadhaar, getting everyone connected and doing digital payments on mobile. That problem is solved. The next big problem is about financial inclusion and lending. So now, someone like Nitin Kamath of Zerodha, he rewrote the books of India's stockbroking. Now, the problem still remains that over 190 million Indians still lack access to formal credit scoring, lending. So that's a big market gap to be plugged. So fintech is one, AI and deep tech, of course, second. It's a global powerhouse in making, because I spoke earlier that India produces about 1.2 million engineers, and AI professionals. So that's going to be a sector where one can focus on AI and deep tech, health tech and med tech. India is a country of 1.4 billion population with one doctor per every 1500 people. So health solutions are not going to grow unless they combine with tech. So health tech and med tech is next area. EV and clean energy. But I will leave you to one of my more expert panelists, Prerna, to speak about EV and energy. She's expert in that. There's localization and vernacular tech. We often forget that India may be one country, but it's more like a continent masquerading as a country. There are 30 nations living within one India. And English may be a common language, but India also has 22 official languages. So anything that allows localization, vernacular technology, even in AI, that's going to be a hot thing in the coming years. Lastly, one industry that I'm personally passionate about, being an artist and connected to the creative world, is India's booming creative creator economy. So India's soft power is on the rise. India has millions of creators. There are new dubbing and voiceover startups coming up. India loves to consume content. I would say that if content is the king, India is an empire. So creative tech is another area to look at. I'll stop now.
Thank you so much for your answer. And you mentioned about this two official languages. And if you look in the wider perspective of the cultural context, there are so many things maybe the global entrepreneurs should learn and be aware of. So what are the cultural or business practices you would recommend to international entrepreneurs to be aware of or to know before going into the Indian startup ecosystem?
Sure. One interesting line or anecdote that I always share when I talk about India, because a lot of people seem that they think that they know India, and a lot of Westerners also understand India. My statement is this: everything that you've heard about India is true, and quite the opposite is also true. So when you're getting into Indian market, one has to be ready for contradictions. The faster and the sooner you learn to embrace contradictions, your chances of success increase. Now, I spoke that India has about 22 languages distributed across 28 states, a billion different consumers, and different behaviors. In India, the cultural insights that would matter are the trust and emotional quotient is greater than term sheets. So if you think that the deals get made in boardrooms, yes, but the deals get also made in over a conversation on a chai, watching a cricket match or enjoying a cinema. So in India, you have to remember trust factor always scores more over formality and term sheets. Secondly, one has to be also ready for speed and scale, because once India likes something, the demand can scale and shoot up very fast. But that's the advantage for startups. If you can play the scaling game with speed, then you can win. India is also very price sensitive, at the same time, likes to be brand loyal. So if you see the old economy, the kind of brands have become popular, may it be from something like Fevicol to Nirma, there is brand loyalty. So initially, Indian consumers will be price sensitive, but once they sign up to their brand, they will stay. So one has to know how to play the emotional quotient game, not just the intelligence quotient game. In fact, I would say the order is in India: moral quotient over emotional quotient over intelligent quotient. So that's to be remembered. India's regulatory complexity also has to be understood. India is getting now more simplified and easy to do business with, but you need to be prepared to play the long game. Some of the rules that apply in the Western world and other places may not apply in India. So you have to be open to embrace the contradictions which I said earlier. And the last and something that I'm more passionate about these days, which I end up talking to global founders, that do not just go to tier one cities and urban centers, big urban centers in India. The real growth is also happening in tier two and tier three cities. Slava, like in UK, we talk about leveling up, and going beyond London. So similarly in India, it's going beyond the famous 7 or 8 metros or cosmopolitan cities. India is also home to more than 100 tier 2 cities. Now, these tier 2 cities create new needs, new innovation. So, if you are able to tap into all these areas, your chances of success are high in India.
Thank you so much, Ani, for your insights. It was very interesting and definitely insightful, especially for international audience. And your insights about the cultural context means a lot when it comes to going into Indian startup ecosystem. I also would like to invite our next speaker, Professor Vignesh, if you can join us and talk with us about the global opportunities and market access. So please, if you join us, can you introduce yourself and tell us a few words about your background?
Yeah, thank you very much, Flava, for having me here. My name is Vignesh. I work as a professor at the Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. I study about startups and the interface between the technology and society. That's my broader introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your introduction. And I would like to ask you the question about the market access. So what makes India an attractive destination for global tech entrepreneurs compared to other emerging markets?
All right. Thank you very much for this question. My wonderful panelist, Annie, has covered most of the things. I do not really know what I can add more valuable, but I'll focus on one aspect. When you say emerging markets, we are comparing India with Brazil and other African markets. So in terms of literacy level, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of amount of people available to work in these enterprises, India offers better opportunities compared to the rest of the countries. I would say technology universalism in terms of mindset. Okay, say 10 years ago, an Indian working in an automobile sector in India cannot work in a similar company in US or in UK. Whereas now it is always possible for an Indian working in an Indian company, in irrespective of the sector, you're talking about automobile or information technology sector, they can work in anywhere in the world. Right. So there is some kind of universalism has already set in the country in terms of labor force. I would say that is one of the major attraction for tech entrepreneurs when you're looking at India compared to the rest of the countries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your introduction and give us this information. If you talk about entering the Indian market as a non-Indian entrepreneur, what are the challenges and advantages of launching a tech startup in India would be?
All right. Thank you very much for the question. If you look at, we got liberalized in 1991. We started having a lot of foreign companies entering the India. The process they follow is you work with an existing Indian company to understand the market for some time, maybe say 10 years or 15 years, then you go solo. I would say similar strategy is going to work very well for a non-Indian entrepreneur to enter the Indian market. I don't say that it is going to be very, very difficult to work alone in India, but having an Indian partner is going to be a lot more advantageous for you to understand the Indian market, right? As my previous panelist, Annie, correctly mentioned, whatever you say about India is true and opposite is also true. So the kind of strategies, what you have it in Northern India may not really work in Southern India or vice versa. So that is the case, having a local partner is going to be a lot more useful to you. Okay, that is number one. Number two, in terms of challenges, there is a lot of unevenness in terms of, say, for example, quality of people who are going to work with you and the quality of customers what you are likely to have. There is a lot more unevenness. With this unevenness, you will find it difficult to tackle or maneuver the existing system on an everyday basis. That will be the second challenge, or we would say advantage as well. Third one, though we talk about 1.4 billion all the time in terms of market attractiveness, in terms of purchasing power parity, we are not that great. In the sense, we are talking about people who can do only the low ticket purchases. They may not be really attractive for tech entrepreneurs. And there is also a tendency not to buy technology products. Suppose, say, for example, if you are into selling certain technology solutions, there is a tendency among the Indian consumers not to buy these particular products. So they are looking at things at a free or a lower cost. That is also going to be a big challenge for you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your insights about these challenges and opportunities. Now, my question would be, if there are any government initiatives and maybe like programs like Startup India and Make in India, how they do support foreign entrepreneurs when it comes to entering the Indian market?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. The support from the government has been always nice. From 91, it is increasing. Presently, I would say the government is a lot more proactive for foreign direct investment. The programs like Startup India or Make in India, the Startup India is predominantly looking at startup, smaller scale enterprises. I won't say it is very, I would say, encouraging for non-Indian entrepreneurs, because we're talking about small scale. There are a lot of incentives are available in terms of funding from the government. So when it comes to funding from the government, they prefer people from India. Since this is a taxpayers' money, they prefer to have Indian entrepreneurs receiving this money, right? But when it comes to Make in India, where you set up your manufacturing facilities here and you end up producing certain things, Tesla is in discussion, Foxconn has already started their operations here in India. When you do it, government is a lot more proactive. Okay, there is performance-based linkage, incentives are available here. There is 3 years tax exemptions available here. A single window clearance is available here. It is going to be pretty good if you're looking at Make in India. The Startup India for non-Indian entrepreneurs or foreign entrepreneurs is going to be a little tricky. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution, and that was very interesting and insightful to know what's the support and what the programs exist and how they support foreign entrepreneurs. That was very interesting, and we move into the discussion about the technology and innovation. I would like to invite the 𝗘𝗟𝗜𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧 to join our conversation and also introduce herself and tell us a few words about your background.
Hi, thank you for having me here. So I've been a tech entrepreneur within the blockchain and AI fields. I'm a computer science engineer by profession. Built and sold multiple companies, lived across the UK, Portugal, Canada, now also Dubai and India. So I have a broad strokes understanding of the ecosystem across those countries. And yeah, I'm happy to contribute in any way possible. I sit on the boards of multiple public listed companies across the continent. So yeah, cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your introduction. And Professor Vignesh mentioned about the government programs of how do they support entrepreneurs.
Yes.
It would be interesting to discuss about the digital infrastructure. How does it help, or how does it shape opportunities for tech startup founders? Maybe you can open up this information for us.
Sure. So if you look at India as a market, I think the esteemed panelists have already explained how it's quite difficult to do business because of bureaucracy. And as those difficulties have been lifted off, people have come and done business and all of that. What tech infrastructure does is it just takes away the bureaucracy element. So instead of going to the bank to do a bank transfer, now you can use unified payments interface to do that. And then you have network effects from people doing it within themselves, and then supplementary secondary apps that get built on top. That's number one. Number two, the government is also doing multiple other initiatives such as unified credit interface, which would allow an SME owner to access credit, because in India, access to credit has been a challenge historically. It's been, I would say, more so solved within the country for the upper middle class. If you think about India, it's also very important to not just think about a single country. There is the equivalent of I would say the top echelon of the society, which behaves rather like Upper Mexico, and then you have a society which behaves similar to Sub-Saharan Africa, and also something like the UK as well, embedded within India as well. So you have like three kind of societies, three kind of markets that you go after. You just can't think of it as a single market. It has the upper middle class, rural India, and you have like the upper echelon of the society. And there are like brands which, because each of these market segments are big enough, there are brands which are going after them individually.
Thank you so much for your insights on that. And we already talked a bit about this upcoming the technologies and the fintech. If you talk in general about the AI, blockchain, and maybe some fintech moves in the Indian startup ecosystem, what role these technologies play in emerging the ecosystem?
Sure. So so you asked me three things, right? So there's AI, fintech, and blockchain.
Yes.
In that respect, India has used AI very well. So we've built on top of LLM models, which exist out in the market. Like we have things which are built on top of GPT. We have things which are built on top of Perplexity, Claude, so on and so forth. So somebody has built an operational AI which uses ChatGPT to basically make operational stuff easier, right? However, what we've not done is built an LLM in-house. That's where China and the US have done really well. And there's been government funding available for doing that. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs now that are focusing on that. So building an Indian LLM is super important for the country. However, India has a lot of AI engineers which are able to take in existing LLMs and then build on top of it for any sort of startup. So that's AI. In terms of general fintech, it's one of the best environments to work in because of the fact that the government has these systems such as UPI, UCI, and so on and so forth, which are not available outside. And using those API stacks, you can build second order products, lending on top, etc., etc. So from a fintech perspective, there is second order benefits that have already started to drop in. However, from the blockchain side, right, it's kind of a contradiction because if you think about how blockchain adoption happens in the developed world, it's usually two things, right? So the first thing is that fintech technology is not available easily within the society, so they use blockchain to send money to one another, right? That's one use case. And the other use case is that there's so much inflation in the country itself that they need to use a US dollar stable coin to be able to save money for themselves. Now both of these problems essentially do not exist in India, which is why the adoption of blockchain on ground for actual use cases is quite lower than other developing countries, right? It's because the major use cases don't exist. But as it becomes really important to have a sovereign money kind of a situation, that's where, as people realize it, as people get more and more wealthy on the scale, that would be a priority for them.
Thank you so much for your answer. And if you talk about these regulatory or ethical considerations which may arise due to these technologies, maybe AI and these new blockchain things. So what global tech entrepreneurs should be aware of when entering this Indian market when it comes to regulatory or ethical considerations?
So a lot of the regulatory, I'll answer it in two, I would say, parts. So from the regulatory perspective and the ethical perspective, in terms of the regs, there's situation has gotten easier where earlier you had to deal with taxes in each of the states. We have about 29 states, and now you don't have to do that. We have a uniform tax code all across the country. However, there are still a lot of local regulations that one needs to understand. So having knowledge of the bureaucrats which operate in the area is super important. If a company is nascent and is coming from outside India, setting up shop there, it's, in my opinion, it's much better to do it in, I would say, a special economic zone where the government will handhold getting approvals and all of that. So we have many of them in India. This is akin to how China also designated a lot of these economic zones, and then growth happened in those areas itself. So that's from a regulatory perspective. From an ethical consideration, when you deal in doing business with in China versus doing business in India, it is like we haven't given up morality totally in the subcontinent, which basically means we follow patent laws. we are, I would say, part of the global network, part of the global society. So we won't, I would say, it won't be that easy to get an Indian engineering firm to just copy something, and then not worry about patent. We have to actively consider all of those things, which is what makes us, I would say, a better alternative to outsource a lot of the work to India rather than China or something like that in the short term. So morality ranks really high up the list because it's part of the spiritual karma dharma of the country itself. So yeah, those are my comments. If you have some counter questions, please throw them my way.
Thank you so much. Yes, definitely we will discuss more in detail. And I also would like to invite our next speaker, 𝗘𝗟𝗜𝗚𝗚, if you can join us and also introduce yourself, tell us a few words about your background.
Hello, everyone. Slava, thank you for having me here today. My name is 𝗘𝗟𝗜𝗚𝗚, and I'm the founder and managing partner of 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗚𝗚 Global Ventures, an international business consultancy and industry network for ambitious tech businesses, which are primarily women-led, enabling them to scale globally. And our mission really is to close the gender leadership gap in organizations and businesses. We have offices in Gurgaon and London, and we provide access to essential tools for success, which are knowledge, strategy, network, and visibility. Um, Being a brand strategist by functional expertise, I also provide marketing and branding consultancy to growth stage businesses both in India and UK. And my particular focus is on people brand strategy, and I've helped a lot of women executives, even CXOs, thought leaders, founders, and entrepreneurs in building global digital first personal leadership and business brands. So that's really my introduction. Glad to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And we already discussed with 𝗘𝗟𝗜𝗚𝗚 about some possible regulatory or ethical considerations. If you take a look a bit more in depth on the policy landscape in India, what regulatory challenges do global entrepreneurs face when they're setting up operations in India, and how they can navigate them?
Right, very pertinent question, and I think my esteemed co-panelists have done a brilliant job of creating a segue to this question. Ani has given us many 1.4 billion reasons for foreign companies to come into India, and we've heard about tech, we've heard about startup ecosystem. So, what I want to really say in a nutshell is that global entrepreneurs setting up operations in India do face several regulatory challenges, and these are really the thorns in the otherwise bed of roses. But with careful planning and the right partnerships, these can be effectively navigated. Um, the challenges are multifold, but I'm not going to really talk about too many of them. I'm just going to focus on a few, which are the bigger ones and which need a little bit of quite a bit of navigating, but more than that, awareness. So, beginning with the complexity in the compliance framework. We all know that India has numerous laws governing businesses, including the Companies Act, foreign direct investment, FDI policies, labor laws, what have you. Um, our business registration process is equally complicated, and when the World Bank was till 2020, the World Bank was doing a report called the Ease of Doing Business Index, and in 2020 India ranked 63rd, uh, as a country where the ease of doing business was good. And starting a business in India takes an average of 18 days and 10 procedures. The incorporation of a private limited company typically requires 3 to 4 weeks. So these are some of the, it's a complex environment. The taxation system is complex as well, for people who are dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. So people who are not aware of the tax structure would find it very challenging. um, India has a multi-layered tax structure, including corporate tax, goods and services tax, which is GST, and withholding tax on cross-border transactions. So, for example, the GST, which is the goods and services tax, we have five different tax slabs, which is at 0%, 5%, 12, 18, and 28%. So, really understanding all of this and wrapping one's head around the business registration, the taxation, and the compliance procedures requires a bit of doing. It requires awareness. And one navigation tip is, to be very careful about the tax advisor to and the local partner that you have to manage filings, to ensure compliance with transfer pricing regulations for cross-border transactions. And that is really something that a company looking to come into India must be very cognizant of and partner with the right people. Because as you heard Ani say, there are a lot of positives, but there are a lot of gray areas as well in the India UK corridor specifically. When you look at FDI, some sectors allow 100% FDI under the automatic route, while others require government approval. Um, when you look at IPR, protecting IP can be challenging due to a lengthy registration process and enforcement issues. Navigation tip to work around this would be to file for patents, trademarks, and copyrights as early as possible. And India's unique startup initiative offers fast tracking for patent application. I would say use India's single window clearance system where available, and build relationships with local government agencies to streamline processes. And last but not the least, India is not one country. We've heard this. My panelists have, all of them have talked about how India is really like a jigsaw puzzle of multiple cultures and multiple diverse cultural landscape. So it's important to really understand the cultural landscape and not treat India as one, treat India as, and a marketplace which really has many, many, many different nuances. Um, Navigation tip: invest time in understanding local business customs. Consider hiring local talent. Vignesh mentioned about partnering with an Indian partner to come in and, probably as a co founder, and look at bridging cultural gaps. And I would really say that. It's important. There are many, many ecosystem enablers, very bona fide, credible ecosystem enablers. It's important to work with a consultancy firm that aggregates all these services on one platform.
Mhm. Thank you so much for your contribution on that. And it was very helpful understanding that it's importance of getting the local partner and reliable partners to step into the Indian startup ecosystem. What's been mentioned before during our panel discussion, we see the rise of female entrepreneurs, and there is kind of the growing the growing appearance of female entrepreneurs and startup founders in Indian ecosystem. If there is anything can be done more founders and on Indian tech startup ecosystem?
That's a very, very pertinent question, Slava, and it's very heartening to see that the union budget of 2025 has laid women and women's economic engagement at the heart of the roadmap towards Viksit Bharat 2047, which really provides a segue into a more balanced and a completely developed India by 2047. Um, and in keeping this into cognizance, there has been a huge push towards enabling women entrepreneurs. So there's been a focus on women, a new scheme which will provide term loans of up to rupees 2 crores for first time entrepreneurs from women, scheduled castes, and tribes has been put into existence. This initiative not only promotes diversity but also opens avenues for non Indian startups to collaborate with local entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds, and this in turn fosters inclusion and innovation. So the government is of course doing its bit to push diversity, push gender inclusion. The Gender Inclusion Fund has really seen a growth. What is also very heartening is that the corporates and ecosystem enablers are really launching and focusing on women led businesses, on their development, on access to funding, grants, mentorship. So, that again is going to go a long way in helping women led businesses thrive and foreign investors to come in and promote this as well. At Connexus, what we also do is we ensure that women, for women, it's not always very easy to get up and leave their responsibilities and travel around the world and park themselves in their destination countries and explore the ecosystem. So what we've done is we organize virtual trade missions, we organize virtual speed networking events. I think more and more ecosystem enablers and organizations like ours are coming together to make sure that we use technology to ensure that women led businesses understand what it is to go global and help them accelerate their progress.
Mhm. Thank you so much for your insights on that. And as has been mentioned, it's a great changes and great rise of the female entrepreneurs exist, and it's definitely the great direction. If we talk about this 2025 in this year, and if there are some non-Indian entrepreneurs aiming to step into startup ecosystem in India this year in particular, if there are any specific things they should be aware of in relation to regulations or budgets of this year 2025, and what are the opportunities they may have this year in particular?
Right. So, aside of what I've already mentioned, I would say that the union budget reflects India's commitment to strengthening its startup ecosystem, of course, internally, but globally also. It's a huge opportunity because favorable conditions are being created for foreign participation. So, by focusing on tax reforms, on funding initiatives, and support for diverse entrepreneurs, India is positioning itself as an attractive destination for non Indian startups looking to expand their operations in one of the world's fastest growing markets. Um, I would quickly like to mention Vignesh had talked about how the government has taken certain measures. I would say that the Digital India initiative is a huge thrust in making India a very enabling ecosystem. Um, a large amount of money, I think 18,000 crores, which is about $2.2 billion, has been allocated for digital infrastructure expansion. 5G connectivity has been extended to all rural districts by 2026 is really the mission. Implementation of comprehensive data protection framework. So the opportunity really lies in foreign tech startups. They can leverage improved digital infrastructure, clearer data governance to offer SaaS, cloud services, and digital solutions to the Indian market. So that's one aspect. That's the whole digital enablement, digital India, and that's the opportunity. So when you see 1.4 billion people, you see internet penetration, you see technology. I think it's just a thriving and a bubbling market. Another thing that the government has done has been the introduction of a deep tech fund in this union budget. A dedicated deep tech fund has been established to support startups in sectors like AI, blockchain, and robotics. And the opportunity here is that foreign startups specializing in deep tech can leverage this fund to advance research and development initiatives in India. And India, with the research mentality and the academic mentality in India is paramount. So I think foreign startups can look at this and leverage this. Um, I would also mention support for cross border collaborations. Recognizing the global nature of startups, the budget further emphasizes support for cross border partnerships. And this initiative aims to facilitate international market access for non Indian startups. So that vision is very clearly there, enabling them to leverage India's vast consumer base and technological infrastructure. I have already touched upon women and underrepresented entrepreneurs, but that again is a point to be kept in mind. It's very diverse, and just as before I close, I would like to mention some entry strategy recommendations, just four of them, which would sort of sum up everything that I've spoken about right now. I would say that I would first call upon the digital first approach, which leverages India's digital public infrastructure to reach customers without heavy physical presence initially. So that's important. Strategic partnerships, collaborate with Indian startups or established companies to navigate regulatory complexities. Targeted state selection, this is important. focus on startup friendly states like Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Gujarat, which have additional local initiatives and incentives. So, find a local partner here who understands what these incentives are and leverage these. And finally, utilize the government platforms from 2014 to 2016. And again, in 2025, there's been a huge thrust laid by the government. So engage with Invest India, engage with state level single window clearance system for faster approvals, and just overall build your awareness, knowledge, and partnerships to the next level to be able to leverage the India story and the huge India opportunity.
Thank you so much for your contributions. That was very insightful discussion about these opportunities for this year, regulatory or any information which is essential for entering Indian market for non-Indian entrepreneurs. Now, I also would like to invite our another speaker, which is Prerna. Prerna, good afternoon. If you can introduce yourself and tell us a few words about your background.
Thank you so much for having me, Slava. I have a portfolio career, so I'm the global advisor at Advocates. I'm also the director of CG Advisors. I work on growing and mobility. I'm an adjunct professor of ESG at IIT Gandhinagar, and I am Bangalore, and a board member at tech startups in India, USA, and UK.
Thank you so much for your introduction. And we continue our discussion of the opportunities of entering Indian startup ecosystem. I also would like to talk a bit more about the challenges and some future outlook of the ecosystem. What do you think are the biggest roadblocks for global tech entrepreneurs in India, and how they can overcome these challenges?
That's a very interesting, and I do believe that both Devapriya and I think the previous covered in detail a lot of the challenges that we have in India. But let me go back to what started off with, saying that India is an extremely diverse place. Drucker has said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what I have seen year after year of my engagement with global startups in India is that they underestimate the nuances of the diversity and the scale and scope of diversity that India has. So to put it into a more scientific context, talk about the Hoff studies cultural dimensions and look at business from angle. If you look at the most starking dimension, that is the power distance, and India scores 77 on that. What translates to is the Indian ecosystem of building business is rather hierarchical. If you are sitting in Europe or UK, organizational policies for operations in India, because here people are used to giving instructions from the top down. Things are changing, things are evolving, but I'm talking of a country that is a continent as a whole. The second, and hence a challenge for most startups in terms of their operational success in India, lies in a dimension of restraint. Now, restraint directly translates into the Indian mind pragmatic and conservative about their spends. And I think Ani have both covered this, also the professor. But what I mean for that is not that Indians look for the cheapest option on the rack, look for a very unique aspect of what's the value of my investment to a culture, because you ought to preserve for future generations, for our children, we do not indulge. So it's not about being the cheapest, but having the Goldilocks solution of the right price for the right product, geography, the right access, most importantly, with the right quality. And a third and interesting aspect of India is, which interestingly stands at 56, that's a score of 56. And this has got nothing to do with hierarchy and chauvinism in the country, but masculinity here attributes to ambition, aggression, ambition, assertion. And you see that ingrained in the Indian youth, right from our upbringing, even to get into one of the top business schools of the country, less than 1% chance of making it. So in terms of business, what it means is your geographic and distribution channels have to have a multi-reach strategy. You cannot just say, I'm going to go e-tail, or I'm going to just focus on mom and pop stores. You have to cater of the region, of the local geography, and of the cultural aspect as well. So these are some of the I see businesses who want to enter in India struggling with, and also Indian businesses who are with, because very clearly what works in Delhi does.
Thank you so much for your insights on that, on how to navigate the challenges which we discussed today, and also opportunities we discussed about entering Indian startup ecosystem. So how the global startups can collaborate with Indian talents and developers and some local professionals, local talents to build innovative solutions. Maybe you can share some insights on that.
Sure, Slava. Of late I've been so sharing that India is no more just a place to hire. Of course, we have 5 million STEM graduates produced every year, but we are also now becoming a great place to build. And that goes with government has made through policies as well as through tips for the startup ecosystem in the last 10 years. So when you are an international entrepreneur wanting to enter India, I think the first fundamental change, or probably an aspect that you might want to consider, is to look at India as an innovation partner and not just an outsourcing destination. So what makes India so, all the statistics and interesting information shared by my previous speakers, you have roughly 900 million internet users in the country. And that's more than 10 times the total population of United Kingdom, to simply put it into perspective. 650 million smartphone users, 31,000 tech enterprises. So the opportunities and scale are quite immense. And how do you really go about collaborating? Well, we have extremely interesting ecosystems that have evolved in the last 10 years, which are very specific, depending on what sector or sometimes even what geography you want to enter into. So if you're interested in pure technology and GCC, then NASSCOM, which is focused on that space, could be a great enabler. Similarly, we have other regional as well as academic technology and startup incubators. Almost all IITs and largely IITs in India have a startup incubator. There are also regional incubators and the Startup India Initiative, which can be great hubs and great enablers to find who you can collaborate with. Before closing, I would like to say one thing that, it always makes sense to collaborate rather than reinvent the wheel, particularly in today's time, where you cannot work in India by just isolated startup focused purely on India. You have to collaborate and you have to build in India to build for the world.
Thank you so much, Prerna, for highlighting this collaborative elements in and a strategy, or maybe the approach of entering Indian startup ecosystem. We discussed about today's Indian startup ecosystem. My next question would be about the future. What is your vision for Indian landscape when it comes to the technology in the next 5 years, and where do you see the biggest untapped opportunities?
So I like to go back to history to go look slightly or peek slightly into the future. I think some of the first startups, not startups, but businesses who came to India was, and among one of them was the East India Company in 1617. And we have had multiple waves of startups entering India with very, very niche focus. For example, we had the pre-90s businesses coming to India, like Unilever, for example, which were largely FMCG focused. The 90s to early 2020s were a diversified portfolio across luxury products, technology, as well as electronics. This wave we are seeing, there's a lot of investment as well as excitement about AI, largely computer-based technology. But if I take into consideration the current geopolitical changes that are happening, new alliances that are being formed, interesting being discontinued, and new ones being explored, we probably in the next few years, India would definitely be leapfrogging from being a digital consumer to becoming a digital innovator. So we have a lot of startups. The companies we work with are implementers of technology. We have little innovation of technology, and that's what I do see India being ready for in the next 5 to 10 years. Besides geopolitical standpoint, India has been talking about India to be the China +1 destination for manufacturing. And now that aspiration is translated. And that means that all the schemes which have been successful in different grades, whether it is production or the Make in India schemes, more success and more traction than it has seen now. And the innovation there will probably be in Industry 4.0 and advanced manufacturing. I'm also seeing some interest and some excitement picking up in the space. So, the untapped opportunities could be your space tech, your prop tech, green technology and innovation, thanks to India's commitment to net zero by 2070, factories, robotics, 3D printing, everything that's got to do with advanced manufacturing, to look at it more seriously.
Thank you so much for your overview of the upcoming opportunities on Indian startup ecosystem. That was a great insights. And also, I would like to invite Ani to join our conversation and also share a few thoughts about the Indian startup ecosystem and opportunities for tech entrepreneurs. If you can give us any final comments on that.
Thanks, Lava. I was intently listening to Prerna and Devpriya's comments. We have less time, so I'm sort of going to just share some kind of parting wisdom, if I'm allowed, playing to the H card. Prerna touched upon China +1. That's a very important factor. If China was seen as the manufacturing factory of the world, India is the next innovation lab. So if you want to innovate, not just outsource, India is the place. The reason why it's important is India had the advantage of leapfrogging a lot of technologies. So India skipped desktop of normal, and it's probably the most digital savvy nation. So India is going to be the next innovation lab. Message for founders and entrepreneurs who are thinking of coming to India, and they should, if they're not, they're already behind. You should know that in India, intent always wins over product. So your intentions have to be clear in terms of your messaging, your communication, your strategy to entry, your connections within all the state. Intent wins over product. Always, always, always be ready to play the long game in India. If you want to grow big in India, learn to marry speed with the scale, you win. If you take that scale globally, you win big.
Thank you so much, Ani, for your final remarks on our discussion about Indian tech startup ecosystem and opportunities for tech entrepreneurs. I also would like to invite Devpriya, if you can also share a few comments on maybe how entrepreneurs should succeed on Indian tech startup ecosystem.
Thank you, Slava. I think it's been a brilliant discussion so far, and everything sort of, has been covered. I just want to sum up with one sentence, and I think what I want to say is that India's digital revolution isn't just happening, it's funded, it's planned, and it's waiting for global innovation. Thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you so much. And just for the recording part, if you can please repeat your sentence, because it looks like we had some little drop in connection. So if I would like to ask you one more time to repeat this final sentence. So Divapriya, if you can also share the final remarks on how entrepreneurs can succeed on Indian startup ecosystem.
Thank you, Slava. I'd just like to sum up this fabulous discussion by saying that India's digital revolution isn't just happening by chance, it's strategic, it's funded, it's planned, and it's waiting for global innovation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contributions. We just had amazing discussion with our experts regarding the Indian tech startup ecosystem and on opportunities for entrepreneurs, especially the ones who actually from outside of India and they aim to step into the Indian markets and they look for opportunities. We discussed many things, so please stay with us. We are moving to our second panel shortly, so stay tuned for our next recording. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this exciting panel discussion on the Indian startup ecosystem, brought to you by ELIGENT TV. Our second panel will focus on the future of Indian startup ecosystem, where we'll analyze the evolving trends and challenges that will shape the next wave of growth in the sector. We are honored to be joined by our official partner for this event, Indian Tech Society and Indian Tech Advocates. So thank you so much for your support and make this panel discussion happen. Now, I would like to invite our first speaker to discuss future of Indian startup ecosystem. F, if you can join our discussion and make introduction about yourself, tell us a few words about your background.
Thank you, Slava. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on the virtual show here. It's tremendously important that we talk about the future of India and its startup economy. My first response to your question really is that, I have built a startup myself, born out of the UK and co-developed in India, having sold into numerous Indian brands, including Startup India, which is where our platform, which is now we've exited, is the backbone of Startup India. So I'm very familiar with the Indian startup economy and have been operating as a British Indian from the diaspora in India for the last 10 years or so. So I have some really cool frontline experiences that I'd love to share on this call. So I'm the founder and CEO of Ren AI, and Ren is a generative AI platform that is transforming the social and sustainability industry. What we're trying to do is provide an affordable, which is the right word based on this conversation, an easy to access way for global companies, businesses, and asset managers to gather ESG related intelligence on companies. The market right now is dominated by big players like Bloomberg and Refinitiv, and we're going to disrupt and upend them with our business. It's been funded by the UK government. I'm also the chair of Diversity Economics Institute, a non-profit institute that's quantifying diversity, equity, inclusion. And of course, I am the co-founder of Tech India Advocates, one of the co-sponsors of this fantastic panel. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for your introduction. It's great to have you here today. We discussed about some opportunities for foreign entrepreneurs to step into the Indian startup ecosystem. Can you share maybe some successful case studies of foreign startups which entered Indian markets, or some real examples of how to make it happen?
Yeah, sure. There are actually many, Slava. I'm going to share two that I think are technically and also market strategy-wise powerful stories. The first one is a fintech born out of the UK originally called Revolut, that I'm sure you've heard of. And Revolut has been trying to enter the Indian market since 2021. In fact, recently they received their regulatory approval in last year. And their strategy is a really interesting one. So I would say they haven't absolutely crushed it in India yet, but their aspirations to enter the Indian market is really quite phenomenal. Their target audience is, the affluent consumers of India. And what Revolut's trying to do is plan a strategy where they want to sell multi-currency cards and a suite of different financial services products into this affluent demographic. They're trying to adapt their product locally. They've been fine-tuning their app and services inside the Indian market over the last couple of years, and doing some major testing with over 4,000 individuals. So they've got a real good grip into the market opportunity, the local preferences, the price sensitivity, as you probably are aware of in the Indian market. And this is a brand that's absolutely thriving in the Western market, especially the UK. And it didn't need to go to India, but it has to. It realizes it has to go to India just because of the incredible demographics and the opportunity that presents Revolut. So that's one really interesting fintech story. The other one, which I think is a phenomenal story, and if you're Indian right now, then you will know that 1 in 3 Indian mobile phones have an app called Truecaller. And Truecaller is a Swedish business. And credit to them, they have revolutionized their the entire spam blocking process on mobile phones in India. And they have nearly 300 million users. It's incredible in India. And what Truecaller's really managed to achieve is the fact that they have understood the pulse of the market. They realized there was a local problem to be solved, i.e., hundreds of millions of mobile phones, both smartphones and feature phones. They're actually feature phone ready as well. And they figured out that, the frustration a user has is numerous spam calls every day. And 2 of my colleagues on this session will know, they live in India, how many spam calls you end up getting. And Truecaller really spent its time understanding the pulse of the market and have launched their product many years back. But actually, India is their major market. 70% of their revenue and their users come out of India. And so this is, again, a Swedish company. 2 great examples of technology-based companies that have entered India consciously and been patient. They've also put in patient capital into the market, but also localized at a level that really makes their target market react to them in a favorable way. So 2 great stories there, Revolut and Truecaller.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting and interesting to know that these are the great examples. You mentioned about this kind of entering strategy, and I believe that it's also very important to understand the local context and maybe the cultural context of Indian culture and Indian markets as well. What do you think that global entrepreneurs should be aware of when they aim to enter Indian's consumer markets? Anything about the consumer behavior, the business culture they should be known before?
I interviewed the great 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧. He is a prominent figure in the Indian science fraternity. He's currently the chair of the Reliance Renewable Energy Board, and he was on my podcast 2 years ago. And he spoke of what he called the 3Ds in India, which made India so special. And this is very important education for people looking at India as a market. The first one is democracy. Of course, the world's largest democracy, 1.4 billion people, a sort of enormous feat, Herculean feat, to be able to unify and bring together, 1.4 billion people under the same, national message, and operating in a way that is great for the growth of the economy. So democracy is the first big thing. The second is diversity of language, dialects, religions, cultures, subcultures. It is the most eclectic group of people coming together and making great things happen. So diversity is the second one. The third one is demographics. Nearly 50 or so percent of the population is under the age of 28, and that number keeps changing. But in essence, they're young people in India right now, and therefore the future of a country where you've got a lot of young people is always going to be bright, no matter what side of the argument you're on. The two additional bits that I would like to add is, one is digital. India is no doubt, I would, if I look at India's growth over the last 5, 7, 10 years, I would say, if you'd ask me what's the one big thing about India on the digital side, I think it's the fact that it's a mobile first, digital first economy now, especially in fintech. It's phenomenal to see, extraordinary in fact, to see how UPI, the Unified Payment Infrastructure, has become such a powerful way to make payments happen at milliseconds or even faster. And I think there are billions and billions of payments going every single month through this system. The last one really is what I call developing. I think one big advantage of a country like India is that it's constantly developing, as in it's not developed, God forbid, which means it's constantly evolving, it's changing. There's new ideas, new innovations, new sub-economies, new microeconomies, a generation that's absolutely determined and driven to make the country and its economy better. I mean, what else would you really want? You'd thrive off that energy. As an entrepreneur, I can tell you, in India is an energy source, like you want to plug into that grid to boost yourself and feel great about yourself. And I think that's one of the things that the Western economy feels like it is lacking. It's sort of a law of diminishing returns in the West, where we want more and more drive and energy, and we're trying to rekindle and boost it. But actually in markets like India, it's abundant. That's where the abundance comes in. So if you understand that you've got these 5 Ds that you've got to contend with, I would say go with your eyes wide open to understand if you can tackle each one of them. And frankly, at a business to consumer level, because I talked about some consumer apps there, you've got to figure out that, the Indian market, and Amazon learned the hard way, Uber learned the hard way, Xiaomi, the mobile handset provider, figured this out, Zoom Car, even Laduri, the confectionery provider, the high-end confectionery provider, is in India right now. There is huge amounts of localization that is required in India, which takes money, takes cash, takes patience, like I said earlier. And you've got to understand the mindset of the Indian buyer. The Indian buyer is quite unique. They definitely want quality products, and they want excellent products, in fact, but they're very value conscious and price conscious. So you've got to understand that you've got to really make sure your product is not only localized, as in like when Amazon came into India to acquire sellers, they created chai carts, all of these carts that ended up at all of these sellers physically, to entice the sellers to become sellers on the marketplace on Amazon, selling their products or whatever it may be. And, cash on delivery, like nearly 70% of Indians right now, if you ask them, want to pay by cash. So these are factors that Western startups and entrepreneurs really need to understand before they think about going into India. I would say take your time and do it slowly, and truly understand the pulse of the country. Work with the Tech India advocates, the Indian tech societies, all of the people on this call, and speak to as many people as possible to decide which country within the country do you want to target, i.e. India is made up of many countries, really. If you're European and you're trying to figure out the country, it's a multitude of many countries inside one country, almost like a continent, I would say. So you've got to figure out which part of India do you really want to sell your products or services to. And I did some good things, and I learned some tough things when I launched my business for 5 or 7 years in India, right the way from hiring people, cultural differences, to actually retaining people. So that's a sort of long-winded answer, but there's so much more. It's such a big and complex answer. I'm sure my colleagues on this call will want to contribute too.
Thank you so much for such an insightful overview, and especially about the behavior of the consumers and the business culture in India. When it comes to entering the market, especially for foreign founders, the global startup hubs and maybe the collaboration with Indian tech clusters may be the way to go and maybe the way to penetrate the market through some networks and communities. So, how do you think these global hubs, global startup hubs, should collaborate with Indian ecosystem and how it can be fostered forward?
Yeah, look, India's changed over the last decade quite significantly. I mean, the rise of the startup India economy, when we were doing our data collection for my last startup, there were a few thousand startups in India, probably one or two unicorns. Now there are over 100 unicorns, 150,000 startups. And the Startup India program is very well established. There's a system, there's a database, there's an outreach. It's a sophisticated model, and it gets better and better every single year. So if you asked me this question 5 or 7 years ago, my answer would have been different. Today, I think every single global startup accelerator hub, whether it's a corporate run, KPMG run, PwC run, Citibank run accelerator, or it's one accelerator that the Googles, the cloud providers and the hyperscalers are running, Google, Microsoft, and so on. Or in fact, it's a independent, model like a Techstars or a YC, a Y Combinator. Today you have cross-pollination happening at every level. I mean, there are numerous stories I can tell you from the UK, from the States, from Berlin in Germany, from Israel. The level of connectivity between ecosystem to ecosystem is at the highest level I've ever seen before. Not only that, I think the governments of respective countries, of these countries that I'm speaking about, I speak about the UK, whether it's the London Mayor's international program for, startups wanting to go into international markets like India, or it's Tech India Advocates. We're an advocacy group, volunteer-led. We're constantly guiding companies to think about the Indian market and the other way around too as well. So I have to say the maturity levels would have been, at this stage, would be at medium, would have been low 5-7 years ago. And I think they're only headed in one direction, back to the last D I talked about, developing. You're talking about a market here that is on fire. And is it for everyone? And I'll close off with this. No, the Indian market is not for every entrepreneur in the West to consider. It is only for some entrepreneurs who've done their research and understand there's going to be a product market fit. So I'll pause there, but I'm sure others have comments to make too.
Thank you so much for your insights and highlighting the importance of research to be taken before entering the Indian markets. I would like to invite our next speaker, 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗚𝗚, if you can please introduce yourself and tell us a few words about your backgrounds.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Karthik, and I work in the space of developing custom SLM models as well as machine vision models. So my area of focus is Gen AI implementation across industries and sectors. Plus, I also work in the space of AI skilling for young people and professionals, helping them actually transcend the journey of leveraging AI in their workplace, in their current job roles. So that's what I do. And my areas of focus in terms of geographies are Middle East, India, and primarily UK.
Thank you so much for your introduction. Today we talk about the future of India's startup ecosystem. My first question would be, what emerging trends will define India's ecosystem in next 5-10 years, in your opinion?
So I look at these trends from the lens of AI. Call me biased, but that's what I do. So I always tend to look at things from an AI perspective. So I think one of the big trends which I feel it's already happening as well is the rise of what we call as Bharat. So typically India is building for, traditionally a lot of startups have built solutions for the top 5%, top 10% users. But now we are seeing, and we are going to see more and more emergent trend of people building solutions for, let's say, tier 2, tier 3 cities, or for the next 30 or 40% demographic or population, because almost 70% of population and users lie in those demographics and geographies. So right now, even if you see from a consumption perspective, the number of users who are using mobile devices or internet, or even as F was saying, in terms of DPI usage, in terms of fintech solutions like unified payment interface, most of the consumption of these technologies are being done by tier 2, tier 3 users. And almost all of them are under the age group of 35 to 40. So that's going to be a key emerging trend wherein you're going to build solutions for this tier 2, tier 3 market, which has to be extremely value for money, affordable, and has to be vernacular. Because India, mind you, is like 3 times of Europe in terms of complexity and diversity, right? Pure in terms of numbers as well as in terms of sheer subjective complexity. So you've got to build solutions, and we will see more and more companies building solutions in vernacular languages, whether it's in terms of content, whether it's in terms of SaaS-based platforms, not just using like literally translation APIs, but you've got to build content also which is very contextual for these kind of folks. And we are seeing, platforms like, Kuku FM, local, that are almost doing 30-40% of their monthly active users in these geographies. In fact, most of the tech startups are now coming out of these geographies as well. So I think we'll see a lot of shift from, India for the world to sort of India building first for itself, like India for Bharat. So I think that's one big trend which we will see. Second, I feel India is also now going to transform from a service-led economy into a more product-based economy, because traditionally Indian entrepreneurs have also been, mocked and to the point of being embarrassed that we're only building back office operations or services-led businesses which have little or no innovation, but are basically supporting innovation globally. But I think that's changing as we speak, and it will happen more and more, wherein we would see more verticalized solutions being built, whether it's around healthcare, around education, even space tech and agri tech. So I think that deepening of vertical based solutions and actually building products and not just services is going to be the like one more trend which I see. The other would be, I think, for any sort of emerging trends around entrepreneurship or growth around innovation, you got to build a ecosystem of patient and deep capital. So I think VC industry in India has been typically again mocked for being very risk averse and favoring only sure bets and successes. But I think that's going to change as well. More and more venture capital is going to come in at an early stage, which will be like pure venture capital and not just sort of mitigated risk capital, which happens traditionally in India, so that you can have capital flowing into IP heavy deep tech ventures, which have higher uncertainty and higher odds of not succeeding. So I think whether it's around government backed funds, sovereign funds, university accelerators, or corporate venture arms, we will see more and more of such capital coming in at an early stage, sort of fostering the innovation ecosystem for high risk and deep tech innovation, which has not happened till now. Next, I think one of the other trends which I am seeing is that most of the startups which are going to come would be AI native. So I have seen a lot of companies, a lot of startups in the last 5 to 6 years. They have tried to pivot around AI. Like they were building something else, and now suddenly they are trying to retrofit AI into it, which is not the way to go about it. But I think the next wave or the new trend would be that people would build AI native startups, wherein across sectors they would not force or weave AI into it, but it will be born with AI. So I think that's going to be like a major difference in terms of AI native startups in all the sectors. So I think these are the 3-4 last trends which I see happening over the next 3 to 4 years.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive overview of these future trends. And as you mentioned, there is a move of creating the products for Indian market by Indian founders using the AI native tools and maybe the kind of originally AI products for the markets. However, how do you think this AI, deep tech, and all of these sustainability maybe driven startups will shape the Indians' growth? Maybe how it will bring an impact to the Indians' economy and Indians' growth development?
See, you mentioned three extremely complicated things: AI, deep tech, and sustainability, which are in themselves broad topics. But if I can sort of summarize in a more concise manner, so if I talk about, let's say, AI, so AI is very important. In fact, I personally feel that AI is very suited and important for a country like ours, because our data advantage is immense. Like we've got Aadhaar, we've got DPI like UPI, we've got DigiLocker, we've got ONDC, which creates extremely large, complicated public data digital trails. And if you combine that with foundational AI models and LLMs for different languages, we can unlock massive possibilities, which make a lot of sense. Like, whether it's around education to personalized learning for our more than 250 to 80 million school children, whether it's around precision agriculture, predictive healthcare, epidemic management. Because for a country as large and diverse, so I mean, you've got large countries, but they lack diversity, and vice versa. But India is pretty unique in the sense that we have both scale and high level of diversity. And it's not close match diversity, is extremely high range, high standard deviation variability. So I think that's one from an AI lens. From a deep tech perspective, I think it will also enable India, which I mentioned in the earlier question as well, to be seen in a more respectable position, that we're not just building services or back office operations for the world, but we're actually doing true blue innovation. And we have a shot of becoming like a tech lab of the world, which I've also mentioned. But I think for that, what we need is sort of right IP incentives and policies, right R&D incentives, and also global collaboration and the risk capital, which I mentioned. Otherwise, many of these innovations have a high failure rate in early stage if they are not provided with patient capital. In terms of sustainability, I think again, in a country like ours with complex supply chains and vendor ecosystems, climate and population as well, that climate resilience and sustainability is not like a good to have or a nice option for us like many of our Western counterpart. It has to be like mainstream. And whether it's around climate fintech, whether it's around green hydrogen and EV infrastructure ecosystem to enable passenger and commercial vehicle movements for a green and zero carbon footprint supply chain, or whether it's around carbon accounting or offsetting and circular economy ventures, I feel that sustainability and broadly ESG would not be a good to have thing in India, but or compliance sort of a tick box, but it'll become like the core business model of companies in India, because it just makes sense because of the complexities in our country. So I think these are broad trends in AI, deep tech, and sustainability, which provide a competitive edge to our country.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution about these opportunities in terms of how the AI, deep tech, and sustainability factors and trends will shape the Indian's economy in the next years. But we keep talking about international perspective of Indian startup ecosystem. So my next question would be, what advice we may give to foreign entrepreneurs who aim to step into Indian ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of my favorite questions, because many of my friends in UK and US, they look at India market and they make these, and no offense to anyone, but they make these fancy Excels, and they look at TAM, SOM, TOM, and it just looks so exciting. And it's a no-brainer for everyone to look at India as a market, because the numbers are so fancy and exciting, right? That anybody on paper would feel that it's a great market to enter into and operate. But some of the things which I always share with my Western counterparts who are trying to venture into Indian market is that, again, look at Indian market not just as a whole market. India is like 3x or 4x of Europe, right, in terms of complexity and diversity. So you have to pick your markets, and you cannot just copy paste your business model that have worked in other countries, but you have to look India in a very micro manner, that I'm going to look at, tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, any demographics, what languages. So you have to have a more deeper focus than just saying that I'm going to tap India as a market. Then you also have to India is also a very high trust ecosystem, which increases the cost of transactions, because people do not typically engage into transactions very easily until they have built a lot of trust. So you could also think about options of building a local ecosystem in terms of partner and support. Navigating bureaucracy is also pretty complicated. So you got to figure out how you're going to manage compliances, what kind of subsidies are available for you. Like India's got, Gift City, smart cities are coming up. There are Startup India initiatives in place. So you got to understand those nuances to make the best of it. Taxation can be pretty complicated, GST rules. So you got to have those kind of capabilities in place as well. And then you also have to make sure that you got to have your products which are price sensitive, value focused, but you just can't go and build cheap products as well, because there is a value which you bring as an international entrepreneur, that there is something which you build innovative in the international market, which has worked, which is of value, which is of quality, and it demands a premium. So you got to manage that fine balance of not just because many entrepreneurs make this mistake of, okay, I'm entering India, I'll just have a cheaper version of my product and sort of sell it here. That's not the game. You've got to build that value proposition and maintain those high standards so that people can differentiate you from a local product or service vis-a-vis your international product. And last not the least is, with India, you got to be a bit okay of working with chaos and contradictions and people saying something else, meaning something else. It's extremely complicated. So you got to be patient and have resilience, because in India it takes a lot of time. But the good thing is that once you build a loyal audience and you've understood what it takes to scale in India, and I've mentioned about Dr. 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧 and Reliance. I mean, some of these companies have figured that out, right? In India, if you really build a strong brand and you build that loyalty, sky is the limit. But you got to be patient. You got to map out the value proposition really well, and you got to price your products smartly and navigate the ecosystem of bureaucracy, taxation, and supply chain to actually make a superlative offering. And I think sort of last thing would be that you got to build that global innovation which you got, but you got to customize it in terms of or sort of localize it in some way and have that fine balance of something truly international but built in context of India. So I think people who are able to have that fine balance are able to make it big in India. Otherwise, people who just try to copy paste the same model and just have a cheaper version of their international product in India and just hope to win, that I haven't seen succeed much. So I think these are some of the inputs based on my experience of working in India.
Thank you so much, 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧. We discussed about the advice for foreign entrepreneurs when they aim to enter Indian market. I also would like to ask F if you have any comments to add to 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗧's contribution.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗧 touched on sustainability. I wanted to make a couple of points. One is the future of India is also bright because of the rise of Make in India. I think that, China's sort of fallback in the manufacturing space has been India's gain. And what I believe is going to happen over the next 10, 15 years is you're going to see systemic change in mindset. So, for example, to date, India has been known for 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧, which is frugal innovation. And my friend, Dr. 𝗘𝗟𝗓𝗚𝗚𝗚 Prabhu at Cambridge has written books on this. And I think that was great till now. India's opportunity now is that as it gets more and more familiar with high value, premium manufacturing processes, what China has been mastering over the last 15 or 20 years, you will see that cascade, that halo effect go into education systems, mindset, buyer behavior, development mindset, even at software level, not just at manufacturing level. And I think the effect of that over the next couple of generations will be immense, because I think Indians in India don't want to be known as just the consumers of innovation. They want to be seen as the creators of innovation off their own back, not something that was handed to them. And that's what the new generation really wants. So I just wanted to call out Make in India as being a major driver in mindset shift and behavioral shift, and of course the creation of premium products, not just affordable excellence that Dr. 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧 talks about, which kind of makes sense to date, but I do think a new future awaits India if it plays its cards right.
Thank you so much, F, for your contribution. That was very insightful add-on to our discussion in relation to the next trends of India. I also would like to invite the 𝗘𝗚𝗚 to join our conversation and also share a few thoughts about the future of Indian startup ecosystem. So 𝗘𝗚𝗚, please, if you can introduce yourself and share a few points about your background as well.
Absolutely. I'm just going to do a quick mic check. Am I audible? Slava, can you just give me a confirmation if you're able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Absolutely. So hello everybody, namaste. My name is 𝗘𝗟𝗚𝗚 and I represent Zoho Corporation from India. So we're talking today a lot about how you make in India the future of so many things with respect to the startup ecosystem. I'm so proud and privileged to be part of this wonderful panel where we are talking about the future. So a little background about me. I have been in the workforce about 20 years now, and in the past 15 years, I have been contributing to Zoho's growth story. Right now, I head the startup initiative at Zoho, which means I get to work with some of the most brilliant minds in the country and across the world. People who have been focusing on innovation, people who write policies, from governments to people who run the startup ecosystem as true enablers. I get to work with them every day, and I really love talking about emotional intelligence in the world of artificial intelligence. And I've given a lot of keynotes across the world, standing at the crossroads of having been a microbiologist once to now what I do in the world of software and applications and cloud tech. It's very interesting, and every day is a new day, kind of reprogramming your mind to learn new stuff. So I'm very excited to be part of the panel. Thank you, Slava.
Thank you so much for joining our discussion. It's a privilege to have you today. My first question would be about the Indian diaspora and role of the Indian diaspora in connecting international tech entrepreneurs. What do you think that diaspora can do, and how it can play the role in connecting entrepreneurs from abroad with opportunities in India?
Absolutely. This question, I think, is kind of a spotlight for me. In the process of collecting my thoughts, sometimes you have to look back at your experiences in order to be useful. When a question is being asked, it's not just an answer for me. So I deep dive into a research. One is collecting all my memories and past experiences. So I realized in the past 2-3 years, especially in my experience, the role of Indian diaspora from across the world has been incredible, not just in intangible ways of accessing network or bringing together international minds coming together in new ideas, but we see it as a tangible result where even in India, the government to everybody in the space of innovation has actively been talking about the contribution of Indian diaspora. In fact, until 2-3 years back, I didn't know that there was a separate convention that existed that has a very Hindi name called Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, what we call the PBD convention. And it's a flagship event that celebrates the contribution of Indian diaspora from all across the world, especially this year in 2025. In fact, the theme seems to be the diaspora's contribution to a developed country, because India will be celebrating 100 years of independence in 2047, and what we call the Viksit Bharat that's been spoken about. So the contribution of Indian diaspora is not just acknowledged, it's celebrated. It's very important conversation that we are having in charting out India's progress, India's development in the next few years. And as an extension of this is my personal experience. I have got to meet some of the most brilliant minds, where it's for me, it's a beautiful combination like music and lyrics, where I get to see the Indian diaspora when I travel to London, when I travel to Brazil, when I travel to Melbourne and Brisbane, various remote parts of the world, where you cannot come back without having bumped into an Indian who's either settled there for work or for various reasons. So there's a beautiful combination of patriotism combined with, an upgraded intelligence and exposure, because now they're exposed to multicultures, people from across the world who have settled down in various parts of the world. They have exposure not just to some of the cultural beauty that India has, but they also have exposure to world-class technology, to ease of doing businesses, the expertise that comes with exposures to such technology and resources. So I have been able to have the fortune to bump into people from Tech Indian Society in London, and today, as part of which, I'm enjoying the privilege of being part of this network. And I can't tell you personally and professionally, it opens a lot of gate. So the conversation has become crucial for us, both intellectually and in terms of emotion, on how we feel as patriots from bumping into them across the world.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And that's what we're trying to do, is to build the bridges across ecosystems. And today we're trying to discuss about the collaborative opportunities to build a bridge between Indian ecosystem and other ecosystems from the UK to America and Singapore. So do you know any successful models for this cross-border collaboration for startups between India and other regions?
Absolutely. So, Slava, what I would do is I'm going to dissect your question into, because some of these are really complex ones and we can talk about it till the cows come home. But to be useful and talk about few specific things, I come from Zoho that serves about 100 million users from across the world right now, and we are ourselves a bootstrap company. So next year we are touching a milestone of 30 years into doing what we are doing. So some of the examples I'm going to draw inspiration from what we have been doing as strategic collaborations, because now we have expanded not just in the USA for the longest, but also in several parts of UK and several parts of Singapore. So instead of picking a few successful models or having to fall back on what Zoho is doing, I'm going to touch upon the anatomy of what makes a cross-border collaboration successful. So like Karthik, our panelist, was talking about everything from an AI perspective, I always seem to gravitate towards everything that has an EI perspective, what we call the emotional quotient or the emotional intelligence. So any amount of success that we want to measure comes from things I believe that we cannot measure, because we're talking about collaboration in terms of access to new markets, access to new resources, new perspectives, and most importantly, understanding the age demography, how we are looking at global talents that we would work with. So beyond just numbers, beyond just measuring success as an outcome, I would like for us to all focus on what you would need for a successful cross-border collaboration as an input. What would you need to do, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, wherever you are situated across the world. For example, you take UAE and India. The synergy is incredible. It's very successful because we're hardly about 3.5 hours. Take Singapore or take Dubai for an example. They are known for world-class infrastructure. They have immaculate work ethics, right from when you want to come for work, how on time you are for meetings, the research and homework that goes into understanding who you're collaborating with. India is catching up with all of this work ethics thanks to the Indian diaspora now that has exposure to cross culture. And they are bringing back some of the best lessons on how, in order to be one of the most successful startup ecosystem. Now we are ranking third. India is ranking third. How to progress? It's very important to understand these intangible elements in order to create this. For example, how Zoho leveraged some of the successful cross-border collaboration for our products and a go-to-market strategy. Something that we can't do by relocating ourselves and starting from to understanding how UAE works, for example. That's not going to happen. It's going to take a lifetime, right? So what we did is we had collaborating partners that could understand what Zoho is doing, and they come with this rich understanding of culture, how the local people think, what their needs are. Like Karthik also said, some people make fancy Excel sheets and think of India as, wow, this is great, 1 billion population, and now we have a perfect strategy for scaling. However, you take India's age demography, the number of languages we speak, and within Indians, we can give each other a proper culture shock. With all of this, it's very important. So we worked with a few partners from the local region who understands innovation, culture, age demography to everything. So when we introduced a few products, for example, the bookkeeping app or the payroll that helps you in doing so many things with your employees, we worked with these partners to understand, for example, how does the corporate tax in the UAE work? How do you even calculate the net profit of your business? What is the difference between your corporate income tax or your business profit tax? All of this could have taken years for us to learn, but working with a partner from that region helped us in kind of having our own niche go to market. And today, even when we talk about an app like Zoho Payroll, we ensured that we are in compliance with the UAE regulation, be it streamlining process, or you get your approvals, or how you would integrate with other apps. Because the key is understanding the compliance, key is understanding the data privacy of the region, other than also understanding the cultural differences that we have. All of this keeping in mind your curiosity that should be fanned by a genuine interest. If you're partnering with someone, it takes some good investment of time and genuinity, along with investment of money and the outcome that you would get. Thanks for asking this brilliant question.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And we discussed about this cross-border collaborations. And if you talk on the level of startups, we want them to collaborate, we want them to co-innovate. So how do you think that international startups, they can co-create and co-innovate with Indian startups, and how they can create joint ventures and some partnerships together when it comes to these early stage companies?
Absolutely. So, now we are interestingly in the time when we are handling the problem of more. There's so much happening. In the process of collecting my answer for this question, I realized we are looking at the future, right? I'm 43 years old, and I'm talking about how I want India to be at 2047 when we celebrate 100 years of independence. I'm also talking about the generation that is going to enjoy or is going to introspect or it's going to dissect some of the things that we are going to bring into action as a result of our policies, as a result of our conversations from today. It's very important to have the courage to be compassionate, to have the courage to reimagine things in this post-COVID era where we want to create something for the next generation that is nothing like ever before. You can't take examples from the past, especially after how the pandemic has humbled us. So what I would want us to look at as part of an extension of this answer is, we have the problem always a fear of missing out. I got to learn from the next generation, along with this word called FOMO. There's also this word called JOMO. That's the joy of missing out. So you put your focus into what you want to do, write down the most important aspects of your cross-border collaboration, do your research, because some of the most incredible results come from, not from because you have a graduation, your certificate from one of the most prominent universities, but because of your people skills, because of your research skills, because you truly understand that networking is all about giving, being curious of what other person does. Today, I'm part of this panel because I bumped into wonderful human beings from the Indian Tech Society, like 𝗘𝗟𝗜𝗚𝗘𝗡𝗧, like Anika Parekar. In that few minutes of interactions, they tell you what networking is all about. They truly tell you what an incorrigible givers that they are in terms of having to bridge two ecosystems, and how the Tech India advocates do a lot of incredible work. Compared to in 2016-17, when we started the Zoho for Startups program, like our AF mentioned, like Karthik mentioned, the Startup India by the Government of India, the flagship initiative, has done incredible work in bringing some structure to otherwise this madness called innovation within the country, let alone you look at cross-border collaboration. Who wants more chaos, right? So now we have an entire page. I want people, to go and look at the kind of content, the kind of initiative like the government, the Startup India has put out, where there's an entire page that talks about the India-Taiwan Startup Bridge to India-Croatia, India-Japan, what we are doing with Republic of Korea. So all the bilateral relationship that we have built, the testimonials that have come from people from various people across the world. As part of G20, what did we accomplish? So the core message is that some of the innovation need not be like reinventing the wheel. Sometimes what we commonly see, like the climate, is the challenge for all of us. So if we understand these basic things, I think is very important. The anatomy of these successful models. How do you leverage local network? How do you understand the work culture, especially when you have access to global talents? Because some of us believe that 9 to 5 is a good work culture, and now we have, thanks to the COVID, we have a lot of people who believe in hybrid or remote work. So understanding these intangible experiences, what it takes to have brilliant ideas, what is your problem solving angle, what does it mean by building something together, keeping in mind the cybersecurity, the data privacy, and the culture. I think it's all coming together for the Indian and international startups to create joint ventures. Now we interestingly have the reverse pitch that's happening for the venture capitalists as well. So now a lot of ethics has been weaved into the money that is coming in, the attention that is coming in to the Indian ecosystem. So it's exciting like never before. And I got to be also part of forums like the India Global Forum in London, that also extends to various editions across the world, that brings all of the diaspora together to have a very 360-degree conversation on the table. So white papers are released after this, which gives you a very unique nuances that otherwise you don't see from the news or the press. So you get a very hands-on, close to the ground information from all of this. And panels like this highlight the importance and the impact that the diaspora have. So that's it from now, Slava. Thanks for asking this question once again.
Thank you so much, Ковпо, for your contribution and discussion of how we can foster the co-collaboration and co-creation between international startups and also the Indian startups developing their own products. If you also can join our discussion and contribute, maybe you have some thoughts on this question as well.
Yeah, I mean, on the diaspora, what I would say is, I'm in the United Kingdom right now. And the first point is I am of Indian diaspora myself, right? I was born in Delhi in India, and I migrated to the UK when I was 9, back in 1988. And there are about, I think, 2 or 3 million people from the Indian diaspora in the UK, probably about 32 to 40 million folks around the world who are of Indian origin living in different international countries. And that number might seem quite small compared to the 1.4 billion people who live in India, indigenous Indians. But actually, this group of individuals is quite mobilized. I mean, they have a huge interest in making India successful from wherever they are. Many of them invest in India, even if it's buying a property in the local town that they used to live in back in the 50s or 60s, to actually transferring money to their family members, to actually seeing India as a investment hub, investing in Indian equities. And I'm seeing now in the UK, there have been numerous, I think somewhere between 3 and 5 venture capital hubs. Some of them are pure play VCs and others are sort of connector organizations where Indian diaspora, individuals with high net worth are putting a bunch of cash into a fund that is actually being plowed into Indian startups in sectors or industries that actually are part of the investment thesis of that particular, say, UK-based entity. And I think the Indian diaspora has got a huge role to play outside of this in education of the native country they live in, or the country they live in, like in the sense that, with Tech India advocates, you will know Ani and myself, my co-founder, who was on the show earlier, we've been working tirelessly for a number of years. We have about 3,500 to 4,000 members in our community. It's all volunteer-led. It's all, free of charge, non-profit. And what we do is we influence the UK government to help them understand the importance of the Indian diaspora, but also the importance of trade, innovation, talent cross-pollination with countries like India, helping them to understand what new India looks like. I remember 5 or 7 years ago, I had to do a whole piece of work around educating policymakers in this country and government leaders and businesses on how the next generation of the Indian is very different. Their mindset's different. over the last, 12, 15 years, they've grown up on, the diet of Shashi Tharoor, who I had on my show recently. And we were talking about, a diaspora in the UK that's been now made to feel really proud because of our past Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who is of Indian origin. So, the last 5 to 7 years, Lava, lots changed in the mindset of the Indian diaspora. They're more motivated to help India, work with India, support India, be helped by India. And I think we've never seen this convergence before. So I feel super hopeful about the next decade or so, 2047 in particular. Hopefully I'm still alive by then. And, thank you for putting up the show. I'll stop there because I've hijacked your airtime, but I'm grateful for the fellow speakers on the show as well.
Thank you so much for your contribution. We discussed today the opportunities for entering an Indian startup ecosystem, cross collaborations, and the trends of the ecosystems, and how global entrepreneurs, they go to Indian startup ecosystem. We had an amazing conversation today. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and our contributors. We got so much insights to share. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our session. And please stay tuned for more updates and upcoming recordings. Thank you.